This painting, this portrait, is by Leonardo da Vinci. It is the only Leonardo da Vinci painting in either North or South America. It draws thousands of viewers every year, here to the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., where it is housed. My name is Leonard Kozianski. Welcome to my studio. This is where I paint, and today we're going to be exploring the secrets of Leonardo da Vinci, particularly in this painting, this portrait of Ginevra da Benci, painted in around 1475. Now, Ginevra was 16 years old at the time, and this probably was a betrothal portrait, an engagement portrait, not a wedding portrait. And we might think that 16 is awfully young to be getting engaged, but it was not uncommon at that time. Ginevra looks at us with sort of a detached look, almost a disdainful look. And yet, this painting has a very calming effect. It has a very glowing appearance. And we're going to discover why it has those two strong qualities. But first, let's go back in history to the Middle Ages. This painting, this page from the Book of Kells, illustrates Christ enthroned. It was painted in 800 AD. The Middle Ages view of the world was very different from the Renaissance view. They viewed the world as an obstacle course by which we would prove our worthiness of heaven. The natural world was a chaotic world, an evil world. And history, the history of Rome and Greece, was the history of decadent, sinful civilizations that they didn't want to have anything to do with. So when they made their representations, rather than being realistic, rather than imitating this vulgar reality, was very symbolic, very spiritual. It used geometry, but it's almost like a geometry that was imposed from above, forced onto this visual image, rather than deriving from reality or nature itself. Here also another page from the Book of Kells of the Madonna and Child, and it's not at all realistic. In fact, notice that the baby Jesus is not really a baby at all, but he's more like a little man. So it's not a very realistic portrayal. It's a symbolic portrayal. It's meant to depict the reality of heaven, the spiritual world that was to be an object of veneration, not a reflection of reality itself. Well, 700 years later, the artists, the thinkers of the Renaissance began to look at the world itself and wonder if there was not an order to this reality. And they discovered that not only was the world not chaotic, but it was very orderly, mathematically precise in its order. And this, by using linear perspective, they were able to use geometry and mathematics to create a very realistic depiction of the world. Therefore, to their minds, proving that this world, the world of nature, was actually very ordered. It was God's creation, and they were discovering God's order in it. Leonardo da Vinci himself read Roman works of literature, and in the writings of the architect Vitruvius, he was inspired to do this drawing, called the Vitruvian Man, which expresses the idea that man's body itself has order, expresses order, geometric order. And so, when we look at this portrait of Ginevra da Benci, we start to discover that there is a geometric order here as well. Notice that her head fits almost completely inside of a circle. He may have exaggerated her head and made it a little more circular than was real. Also, notice that her eyes are very spherical. Da Vinci himself broke the law when he dissected corpses to see what was underneath the skin. And in doing so, he saw that eyes were actually spheres. And here, he places Ginevra's right eye right in the middle of the circle of her head, giving this painting a very calming, very balanced appearance because of the geometry that Leonardo is using in creating this portrait. He also is concerned with realistic detail. Notice that he paints every strand of hair, every lock of hair. He also paints the leaves one by one of the juniper trees behind her head, the juniper being a symbol of fidelity. But Leonardo was famous for not finishing things. And notice in this picture, in the lower right, that the foliage of the tree is just sort of roughly dabbed in, as if he hasn't finished the painting yet, and he never would. Now, at the same time that they were discovering the mathematical order of the world, artists and thinkers began to look at nature itself and wonder if there was a truth to be discovered there. And so they began to look for the truth in nature. We would later call this science. And part of that nature, that science that Leonardo was involved with, was the science of the materials he was using, the science of paint. And lucky for us, he left behind a number of unfinished pictures. Now, oil paint has two very prominent characteristics. It can be very opaque, but it can also be thinned and made very transparent. Notice in this example of paint on a palette that the center column, the colors are very transparent. They're luminous. They're almost stained glass-like, whereas the colors on either side are opaque, and they're more solid, not nearly as luminous. If we could look at one of his unfinished paintings, like this painting of St. Jerome, we would see that he began his paintings with a foundation of solid, opaque colors, black and white, that creates this very contrasting foundation on which he would put more transparent layers over the top. Now, if we could look at one of his paintings in cross-section, we would see that he starts off with a panel, and then a wood panel, and then he paints a black and white underpainting on that, and then he paints translucent and transparent colors over that underpainting, so that when light shines on the painting, it travels through the upper layers, the transparent layers, hits that underpainting, and the black absorbs the light, whereas the white reflects the light. And so when that reflected light travels back through those transparent layers of paint, they're colored, almost like stained glass, giving his paintings a very luminous, glowing appearance. And so let's look at that again. Notice how that center column is made up of transparent pigments, transparent paint, which has a very glowing stained glass appearance. This painting is 500, almost 600 years old. As oil paint ages, it becomes more translucent. And in this portrait, we can start to see some of his underpainting starting to show through. In fact, we can start to see the outlines of the black shape that he used as the foundation for this portrait. We can even start to discern the outline of that black shape, which he would use to absorb light to make the face glow. Notice how that black really does make the face glow. But in addition, he had to paint the white, the light parts of the painting as well. And we can see from this painting and from this unfinished painting that he's using white paint underneath the face to give it a luminous, glowing appearance. So, in this portrait of Ginevra da Benci, painted in 1475, we see Leonardo using two very prominent techniques to give a sense of order by using geometry, and to give a glowing, luminous appearance to the painting by using the science of paint itself. Thank you for watching this video. Please subscribe.
If you like this video, be sure to subscribe, like, and share.